A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
So I'm really glad that you came here to do this. It's fun.
It's good to see you. It's been a little while.
It's been a while. I don't know how long it's been. The last time I talked to you, I remember that I was on the phone in my car, and we had a short conversation, and I think it was like, it's been a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we got together originally on a regular basis back when the end of the world was going gangbusters. I was with Rotary.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, you did a lot of work for Rotary.
Yep.
I know that. This is Jeff Kenady on Frankie Say with Kenady Wealth Group. And I'm really glad that you agreed to be on this pod. Something that I think about a lot, it's this idea of what should a 16-year-old person do if they want to build wealth? Now, I think it's fair. I think it's fair to kind of operationally define what wealth is, because the spiritual side of it is different from the material side.
Sure.
And if there's something called net worth, there's spiritual net worth, and there's actual financial net worth. And you do know who Robert Kiyosaki is,
Sure.
The guy who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Right, yeah.
Is that a good book or a terrible book?
It's terrific. I read the whole series, got his game to learn. I use it with my kids. It charges $200 for this game. It's like a Monopoly game, but it's more realistic scenarios that you would do. And I help my kids learn simple financial math and some concepts that they're just not taught in school.
It's a $200 board game.
It is.
So it's funny. I did buy Monopoly for my kids a couple Christmases ago, really early on, and it just turned into like a big fight. And my boy, I caught him cheating, and he was the banker.
He was
He
reaching
did
in the till.
He did exactly. Yeah, he reached into the till. This 6-year-old kid is already cheating, and I like to make the joke. I'm not sure how funny it is, but if you think that people playing board games like Monopoly aren't going to cheat, they might. But if somebody is willing to cheat at a board game with family, is it possible that bankers, lawmakers, politicians, high-level government feds would possibly cheat?
It's possible. There's an odd chance. Yes.
It's a very low chance that they would do something like that. But so he goes ahead and cheats. I catch him. I go, oh my gosh, did you just rip off a $500 bill out of the bank? So we had that whole thing. So now nobody wants to play Monopoly anymore because it turned into this terrible thing. Yeah. But Cash Flow Quadrant, I think, is the name of that game.
Well, yeah, that's the name of his second book, Cash Flow Quadrant.
Okay. What's the name of the board game?
Cash Flow. Yeah.
Cash Flow.
Yeah. Rich Dad, Poor Dad's his first book. Then Cash Flow Quadrant is the second book. And I think he probably introduces the game as part of that book launch and so forth. But sure, that was a long time ago.
On the idea of wealth creation, so maybe you can operationally define it, but I'm going to define it in my own way, and then you can critique me and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Wealth creation is when you are trying to build something, either put a roof over your head, food. You're trying to build your own operation in a way that you can survive. And the better you do that, I don't want to say it's easier, but I think life is a little bit easier when finances aren't a huge problem, as opposed to if money is the root of all evil, or the lack of money is the root of all evil. And I know, like during the holidays, I know that I've got dependents, wife, children, and it becomes increasingly more difficult to buy gifts for Christmas. I know there's a lot of people that have no problems buying gifts for their kids, and some people really struggle. It's both. So in the idea of wealth creation, how do you view this idea of wealth creation? Because we're not talking about how do you get super rich and buy a yacht. That's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
So,
well, I've heard it said many times, you probably have too, I've been rich and I've been poor and I like rich better. It's that, but what are they saying there? It's freedom, right? It's to choose to do whatever it might be. And some people might use that to lavish gifts on themselves or their family, or they might use it to do good in the world in some form or fashion. So everybody's got to define that in their own way. But I think it begins with, as you were talking about, you referenced Robert Kiyosaki. I think it begins with having conversations young about finance. I mean, we're not taught that in our public education these days. People don't really discuss this topic. It's sort of a taboo for many people. So why do you want to, and I have these conversations all the time in my office as a financial advisor, wealth creator, or wealth preserver, or whatever it might be. Why did you do what you did? Why did you work the job you did? The questions that just to get some context on who I'm working with. How did you get here? What do you want it to do for you now that you're here? Right? You've accumulated stacks and stacks of pictures of dead presidents. Now what? And oftentimes I get a blank stare. They don't know. They've just been told, well, we're supposed to save for retirement. So that's what we're doing, but they have no idea how even to access it in retirement many times. Wait, we can turn this into mailbox money. This can just be an income stream for life. They don't even know why really they're doing it. So I think having that why question answered or dealt with at a young age, like I'm doing with my kids with this cash flow game, it's a little laborious at first because there's a lot of math and there's a lot of writing because you're working your balance sheet and your cash flow statement and so forth. But once they start to get it, they get into it, and it brings up some real world questions. I think it's a good strategy, but certainly just having the conversation with your kids, a frank conversation that will help prompt them to begin thinking about that topic.
What do you think about in the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, where it talks about how an asset is something that puts money into your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket? And the reason why I bring that up is when I was reading the book, and it said something along the lines of, so you have a car, and you paid $15,000 for the car. So you're very tempted to put that on, one would be tempted to put that on their own personal balance sheet as an asset. It's worth $15,000. And in the book it says, well, the bank definitely thinks house and your car is an asset.
Right.
But how do you teach it? Do you think so I have a car and I have a house, okay? If I stop paying the property taxes on my house, they're going to take it away. So I'm not really even sure if I truly own it.
Correct. Yeah, the bank and the county do, more or less.
What do you have to say about that? An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Can you see how people are confused?
Yeah.
They don't know the difference.
So your house is a good example that he uses in there. You're paying the bank. Most people have a mortgage on them, of course. You're paying the bank every month, and you're right. If you don't make that payment for very long, they'll come and take it from you. Same thing if you don't make your tax payments and so forth. So your primary residence where you live, that's really still an expense, even if you own the thing, because you're maintaining it. There's a cost to that. And not only just money, but time and taxes, of course. Now, if that same property is being leased out to someone, then it's produced enough revenue to cover itself and then some. Now it becomes an asset to you. So it's just thinking in terms of his whole thing is passive income. That's the freedom, right? So in the game, you start off with your everything between secretary or janitor to pilot or lawyer, doctor, so different income streams and so forth, but different expense levels too. But you have your W-2 income, as they would call it, just whatever your salary is. But the point of the game is to work to a place where you have enough passive income to offset all your liabilities, all your expenses every month. Part of that is learning to pay down some of your debt so you get that number lower and your passive income can be lower. So freedom can be, in the game, I've found freedom can be found with those lower income jobs who are living much more modestly than the higher ones who are living beyond their means and owning the yacht, owning the second or third home, and and other doodads, as Robert Kiyosaki calls them, toys that just cost you money. It's harder to get out of that rat race when you put yourself in that position where you're trying to keep up with the Joneses or whoever it might be. And it's an issue.
Do you ever come across people in your line of work where somebody who's making $70,000 looks or feels richer than somebody making $150,000 a year?
All the time. And I've been shocked continually. I've been in this business 22 years or so. And I mean, you cannot judge a book by its cover. I mean, you could look at somebody and say, you know what they do, and you kind of see how they live, and you're like, oh, no way. And they've got $3 or $4 million saved up because they've just been very frugal. And the opposite end of it, you look at the wheeler dealers, you think they're doing great, and they barely have $100,000 that they could, to their name that's liquid. Or even just in net worth, right? Because they live above their means. So it's a mentality.
It reminds me of that book called The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah, I was going to mention that one. Yeah.
Because, that book is one of those books where every chapter that you read, it's a reiteration of the exact same thing. And I remember I was talking to my wife about this, and I'm like, you've got to check out this book. If you read the first 3 or 4 chapters, you don't really need to read the next 17. Mm-hmm. It's always helpful because they're all just kind of case studies. And she said, well, what's it about? I go, well, there's 3 rules that this book is pushing. It's frugality, frugality, frugality. It's just this idea of the chances of, if you're driving a Honda Accord, which I did for 13 years. I just got out of my Honda Accord, and I miss it, by the way. But when I was driving that Honda Accord, I remember 13 years ago, I bought it for $14,000. I just sold it for $8,000. Well, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty big win.
Yeah.
Because the amount of money that I paid off as quickly as possible because it's a liability.
Right.
And it was a depreciating liability in terms of there's appreciating assets and depreciating assets. Right. It's probably a good idea to buy appreciating assets.
Yes.
You don't want them to depreciate. But it's a shocker when you tell somebody, listen, I'm glad you own your home. That's good. Even like a modest home. There are these awesome bungalows on State Street in Quincy. And I remember when they were going for $60,000, $70,000. And now they're really hard to find. And now you can't get one. You can't pick one up for under $170,000. But 10, 15 years ago, buy one of those bungalows, get a low interest rate mortgage, and pay that sucker off. But the mistake is when somebody says, oh, my house is my best asset, or it's my only asset.
Yeah.
But it's not an asset. It's always taking money out of your pocket. Now, if you turn it into an Airbnb or you lease it out, like you had said, now it's an asset. When that house is paying you a penny a month.
Yeah, net, right? After all the expenses, right? Yeah.
It's an asset. Yeah. Okay, so let's pretend that there are some 16-year-old high school kids listening to this podcast. Some of them go to senior high. Some of them go to QND. What would you tell young kids about the pitfalls of the world? Because the pitfalls have always been relatively similar over time. Each generation has its own thing that it's dealing with. So maybe the previous generation had really low interest rates, but getting out of high school, they're not going to find 2.5% 30-year fixeds coming out of high school if they decide to buy a house. Mm-hmm. Would you even tell them to buy a house? Would you tell them to rent? What are some of the pitfalls to stay away from when you were a high school kid? Because then we could talk about, and if you don't want to talk about that, we can talk about what should they be doing. So either what they should not be doing or what they should be doing. Because between 16 and 25, that 9-year span, a lot's going to happen for a person.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on the issue. I've got 16-year-old twins and a 13-year-old boy, and then I've got a son in college. He's in his sophomore year at 20, and some interesting things about what not to do is, well, I'll start with the basics.
What do you tell your kids?
I'm sorry?
What do you tell your kids?
Yeah, well, again, we do talk about the financial education, and we talk about just the proposition of college, for example. Everybody thinks, we got to go to college. this day and age, it's stupid how expensive it is, and really most people don't even use it. I got a mechanical engineering degree back in the 80s. I went to the Navy, flew fighters. I got in because I had a technical major, but I didn't use that, obviously.
You flew fighters?
I flew F-14s.
Oh my gosh.
That was a lot of fun.
Well, go ahead and finish that answer, and then we might have to talk about airplanes for a minute.
Can we limit it to a minute? I don't think so. Get me started. But anyway, so I got the degree, but I didn't use it in the Navy. Got me in the Navy. I got out and I used it for a little while. I was a project engineer I built a wastewater plant down in Branson, blew the top off of a couple, 8 or 10 hilltops down there to put basins in it. So that was interesting, but it wasn't really my passion. It wasn't really where I wanted to go. I had kind of studied aviation design and so forth. But ultimately, here I am, a financial advisor. I'm not using my mechanical engineering degree. Now, my bespoke portfolios, I kind of get to scratch that design itch to some extent, but that's about it. A lot of kids these days, though, they come out of school with, heaven forbid, gender studies major or something of that nature, or just history or whatever it might be. And all great education probably, but it's just not marketable. The skills are not marketable. So make a decision early on a career path. They do this in other parts of the world, in Europe particularly, it comes to mind. Early on, they're selected for, your college material, you should probably go that route, or, you know what, you'd be better suited for a trade. And I think these days kids should really consider, and there's great programs I know at the high schools here and other places around the country, just welding, for example. You can come out of high school with a certificate for welding and make like $40 an hour, and man, you specialize, and you can be making 100 plus an hour in the oil fields and wherever it is as a 19, 20, 30-year-old with no debt. Imagine that.
A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
It's just ingrained. You got to go to college. There's a documentary film my wife found called Borrowed Future. Borrowed Future. It's on Amazon Prime, I think, or Netflix. You can find it out there. Your audience should definitely, if they have kids thinking about college, if teenagers are listening to this and they're thinking about college, you should go absolutely and watch that film. It talks about how the student loan program started as a nice help, hand up from, not a handout necessarily, but a hand up from, but backed by government loans. So, but it was capped on interest rates and so forth. Well, over the decades, those have become privatized, and now those lenders have shareholders to answer to, and the rates have they'll gouge your eyes out. I mean, there's one example in there, a teacher, he's got a teaching degree, he's teaching and math and coaching high school football, and he literally is going to pay off his last payment for his student debt as he is eligible for retirement, okay? It's horrible. And another guy, an orthodontist, he comes out with $600,000 in debt. The debt service is so high that by the time he gets his hands around it, as he's launching his practice, it's up to $1 million, and he's paying $10,000 a month just to service the debt, not even making a dent in it. This will scare kids into some reality, some sense of reality, I think. It certainly got me thinking, and I want to share a story about my college-age son who's taking that really to heart now. But, you don't have to go to college. And I'm a guy who is all about the college. I've got an engineering degree. I was all about it, but here I am not necessarily using it. And I think college is valuable for for other things, networking, meeting people, learning how to survive on your own in a quasi-real life environment, right? Before you have to really go out there. But it's not required at all. There's so many, we need so many trades, specialized trades, skilled labor in this country that, you can write your ticket and not have debt, and you don't have to make $250,000 a year just to make things, just to float along. You can make a real good life. I know I've got clients whose kids are linemen for Ameren or whatever, but we just don't have enough skilled labor to fill those jobs. So don't just get myopically focused on got to go to college, because so many people flounder around, come out with a couple $100,000 of debt, and that can be done in a heartbeat. And then now they've got a foot they're in a hole already, right? They're underwater trying to work their way out. Wouldn't it be much better if you started with no debt, but you had some skills that you could take to the market right away and just start earning a living? And it's a much better way to think about it. Now, not to say you don't ultimately go to college for the specialties, be a lawyer, doctor, engineer, those types of things. You're going to need to go get some that type of education, but don't rule it out.
So Einstein gave some type of commencement address at a major university, and there's a question and answer session at the end. And I have looked all over for this speech on YouTube. I can't find it, and I don't know if this is urban legend or not. But I guess during the Q&A, one of the students, grad students, said, "So, Mr. Einstein, apart from all of your theories and all of the science that you've done, what is one of the most impressive laws in the universe?" And Einstein allegedly said, "The law of compound interest." And I think about this idea of when you get out of high school, when a kid gets out of high school and they make this decision to take on, they spend 4 or 5 years in a university setting where they're having a great time. And a degree in my mind, I'm not anti-college degree, but in my mind it shows that you had a goal, you went after it, lots of other people can verify that you did this work. Here is the series of...
And you got a transcript to show for it. I showed up on time. I did the work. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Here are my writings. Here are the scores of my tests. I committed to something. I got up on Monday mornings at 8 a.m. when maybe there was a raging kegger the night before. I still went to class. I still went and spoke to my professors and did all these things. So it is some kind of proof that somebody did something. It's like whenever I look at resumes for my business, when I see somebody worked at McDonald's for 10 years and they moved their way up from sweeping the floors to the register all the way up until some type of, I think working in that corporate environment is huge. I will hire somebody that's worked 10 years in McDonald's, because they can live in that corporate world. Well, they can probably live in our world too, because it's not corporate. It's probably not easier, but it's just different. But this idea of a young person getting kind of a head start on something, bringing in an income, because I don't know if someone's job is an asset or not, but I would think if an asset puts money into your pocket, because the person, him or herself, is an asset. Because if you believe in yourself, you can put money into your own pocket, and then you leverage a job to put money. So you plus your job can put money into your own pocket. So the combination of that becomes an asset.
There's so many ways we could go on this, because you're an asset. Your life is an asset. Your Social Security number is an asset to the government.
Yeah.
So that's another whole conversation on taxes that I love to talk about. But
we can talk about taxes.
Yeah.
Taxation is theft.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. And the way they spend it is, it'd be one thing if it was. But,
we can go
down that path.
We could. Well, let's just finish this though. This idea of somebody getting out of high school and they go and they attack. And they're trying to instead of them spending money and spending 4 years and having no income, well, they'll have some income, but they're not saving their money. They're taking on student loans, let's say, and they get out of school and they're $100,000 in debt. Well, if they did have a job over those 4 or 5 years, Did they not spend the money, or do they have $100,000 saved up in the bank to pay off that student loan? I doubt it.
Yeah. So I'm going to sound like I'm on Robert Kiyosaki's payroll, but I'm going to go back to the cash flow game. It's been amazing to me to see my kids and other kids, my son's friends or whatever, teach them how to play the game. He's got these things in there called doodads. You land on a certain space and you got to pick up a doodad card, and you might buy a new pair of sunglasses, or you might buy a boat and take on a boat payment or whatever it is. And all that stuff seems fun to us, and and kids will, they get a job at McDonald's, or they get, in high school, whatever they do, and they get a little money burning a hole in their pocket. They got to go get things, and he calls them doodads, and a few iterations of that, and the kids are like, I don't want these new sunglasses. What do I have to pay for? The light bulb comes on. Hey, wait a minute. I don't have to be this massive consumer. I can rein that in. And I think that's part of the education that they need to get. They just need to learn to start with the right mentality and not put themselves in a hole where they have to be on the hamster wheel or the or the rat race.
The rat race, as he puts it.
Yeah, rat race. I was talking about other jobs and skilled labor and so forth. There's always sales, and that's I guess the oldest career in history or whatever. But it's also the most lucrative if you can do it, if you know how to do it. I have to tell this because I thought it was insane. I had my son set up he's in business school at Texas A&M. He's getting a finance degree. He just told me before I came over here that he got his last grade for his finals on his accounting test, and he eked out the A, so he's still keeping his 4.0, so good on him.
Oh, wow.
But I was worried about it this semester.
What's his name?
Joshua.
Shout out to Joshua.
Yeah, he's killing it, and he's got a lot going on down there, but he was I had him set up for an internship in a kind of his chosen field, finance. I through some of my connections, I had him set up to go intern with a real estate investment trust and learn like inside sales and how to evaluate deals and underwrite and that kind of thing. And I thought that was going to be great for him, but one of his buddies in high school called him and said, hey, we take this interview. I'm going to do this job this summer. It'll just give me some extra points. You don't have to do anything. Well, he did, and he was intrigued, and it was a sales job. Now get this, Frank. It was door-to-door sales, selling pest control in New York on Long Island, post-pandemic. If you can imagine knocking doors, doing that, selling pest control door-to-door. And he's like, Dad, what do you think? I said, well, I think you're going to get beat up. I think you could make a lot of money, and if you survive it, you will get life skills that will be invaluable. But there's going to be days when you're going to want to curl up and in a corner and cry because you got kicked off the porch, you got yelled at, you whatever. But if you could do it, great. So he went out there, and that first week I got that call. He was ready to quit and come home. It was a 24-hour literally drive from where we live in Texas to out there. I said, well, you're kind of pot committed now, bud. But I gave him some pointers and tips. I said, but hang in there. It'll be worth it. And I'm telling you, in 2.5 months, he absolutely killed it as a sophomore in college. He's taken home a nice big 5-figure income out of that. I mean, and he knows guys that are doing that for 4 months of the year, and they take the rest of the year off making $200,000-$300,000. Wow. So there's so many different ways out there to make money than to go the college route and just try to get employed by somebody else. That's Kiyosaki's point in the cash flow quadrant is you can trade your hours for dollars, but there's a very low glass ceiling on that.
Right.
Even the professionals, so to speak, the doctor, who if he doesn't show up and perform surgery, then he doesn't get paid, and neither does his staff or whatever, right?
Right.
Lawyer, the same, engineer. Until you become that person who can not have to show up and the business still run, you're just a laborer, essentially. And that's what you want to try to gain a mentality for how to create wealth. That's how you started the conversation. How do you create wealth? Well, first of all, define what that means to you. But to me, it's freedom and having those assets that pay you so that you can, I told you I'm a pilot. I had visions when I was in college of flying off of dusty dirt grass strips and whatever mission readiness kind of task for missionaries in the field or whatever. I didn't know exactly specifically what it was. I could see it clearly, and ultimately I got some really good training on aircraft carriers, so I can, and I still fly, so that may still happen. Although I'm getting later, I'm getting closer to 60 than 50, so those days are numbered. But
I'll be 60 in 13 years. Hey, so
it'll be 3 years for me. So
16 to 25, we got that covered. 25 to 40, what should, heaven forbid, a 25-year-old to 40-year-old has these student loans, right? Do they need to pay those off immediately? What about the debt situation? So there's another guy in the fold, pretty popular guy, of course, named Dave Ramsey. And he famously recently, I don't know if this is how recent it was, somebody said, okay, I get it. You don't want to go in debt. What would happen, though, if somebody gave you $1 billion interest-free loan backed by government? Would you take that loan and do something with it? Would you take that money and do something with? He goes, nope. And I thought to myself, Dave Ramsey, really? You're saying no to that?
No. I mean, Dave, he's got a lot more listeners than I do when I did radio or whatever. But I mean, I disagree with several of his tenets. He's like, you got to pay your house off. Got to pay your house off. The math doesn't say that. I mean, if you, especially up until about 18 months ago when we were at zero interest rates, basically, you could get mortgages in the 3s or high 2s. I would encourage my clients to take that longest term loan they could get. Take a 30, don't do 15, and lock it in, because you might have heard inflation bandied about recently. I mean, those dollars 10 and 20 and 30 years from now are worth less. Why would you give the bank your more valuable dollars today, especially if you're saving that difference elsewhere and you've got the house? You could stroke a check and pay it off, right? Because you save that money elsewhere. You could stroke that check, but you're using other people's money. That's just what banks do. You're creating arbitrage there. You're borrowing for 3 from them. You're getting appreciation in your house because of inflation at better than 3 potentially, and besides that, you're having a lower mortgage payment and just sending the bank worth less and less dollars over the decades and saving that difference. Where Dave is right is people also buy term and invest the difference, or they'll, they say, but they don't invest the difference. Take a longer mortgage with a lower payment, invest the difference. It's that second part people have trouble with, because that money builds up and starts burning a hole in the pocket. But if you can set it aside and invest that in your passive income streams and build your wealth on that side, then that house is no longer a liability. If you've got, it's because you got a balance sheet. You got assets on the side, the balance sheet, that take care of the mortgage.
So you want to touch the third rail? What causes inflation? So I have an opinion about what causes inflation. I think it's a very short phrase. Some people think it's I don't want to pick on these fast food chain restaurants, but let's just say a fast food chain restaurant. Oh, they raised their price of a hamburger from $4 to $7. That's what causes inflation. Okay. Everybody that is paying bills, they have noticed inflation. It's been all over the news. The government says it was at 8.9%, something like that. I went into the grocery store, and there's so Sara Lee makes this loaf of bread called honey wheat. It's like it's just a regular, my kids love it, okay? I try not to eat it. It's got so much sugar in it, but my kids love it. And I noticed the price went, they were selling it for about $2, and the price went up to $2 and what was it? I think it went from $2 to $4 or $2 or from $2 to $3.50, something like. It was some crazy astronomical amount. And I was thinking to myself, if we only have like a 9% inflation rate, that bread should have gone from $2. It should have gone up 10%.
Right. 220 or something.
220, 230, but it went way past that. I mean, it went up past $3. And I hear, what causes inflation?
Well, I mean, what at the root causes government's overspending and having to print money to cover that debt service and whatever it might be. I mean, that's where it begins. When we're sending money overseas to secure other nations' borders, say in Ukraine, when we won't even do the same for our own. I mean, that's a mess that has to get cleaned up. And I mean, that's ultimately because you got fiat money. It's not backed by anything. They go in debt at, 34 trillion basically in debt right now, with $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion a year deficits. I talked about that ad nauseum for years on radio myself. I mean, it's gotten worse. When I first started talking about that, we were like 17 or 15 trillion in debt.
And everybody's president that they vote for, that they own and love, that's their guy in office. Each one of those guys raises the debt.
Yeah.
I mean, from Reagan to present, I've never seen, if Republicans say that they're all about small government, I can't think of a U.S. Republican president that made the government smaller. I mean, even our previous president raised the debt by 10T. And I mean, Obama raised it. Trump raised it. Biden's raising it. They all do it. Is there, and I don't mind talking about this for a few minutes because so in terms of wealth creation in the country, it's really hard for our country to build wealth if we're 34 trillion in debt. I mean, are we bankrupt?
And we're probably way more than that when you take in all the unfunded liabilities like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, things of that nature. I've seen the numbers as high as in the 130, not 30s, 130s as far as that goes. That brings me, it's all kind of interwoven, right? Because at some point, they're going to have to raise taxes. Taxes, I can make the case and show you evidence that taxes are basically on sale right now. As of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we got a gift, right? That was...
taxes are on sale?
It's on sale right now, on sale. And they could and probably will go much, much higher, much, much higher. This is what a clarion call I've been trying to make for people for a long time, that TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, gave us not only lower tax rates at the federal level, but also much broader, taller, whatever you want to describe, however you want to describe it, tax brackets. So in other words, 28 maybe came down to 24. 24 goes way up into what used to be 33. Okay, so there's lots of room to convert at 22 in the 22% bracket, convert IRA money, say, to get it tax paid at what I consider to be rates on sale at 22 or 24, where after 26, when these tax cuts sunset and beyond, people may look back fondly at 22 and 24% tax because all this money is deferred in IRA. So that's one of the things I would say to that 20-year-old. I say to my 20-year-old, don't start a traditional IRA. Pay the tax on that. Pay the tax on that seed.
Go Roth.
Go Roth and and never pay tax on the harvest.
Okay,
it's going to be much bigger, right?
So we're talking about a Roth IRA named for the politician, I think, that sponsored the original bill. A Roth IRA is something where you pay the tax on it immediately, and then all of that money grows tax free. Yeah, so
after-tax money goes in the front door, grows tax-free, comes out tax-free. Certain stipulations, but that's the way you get it out. Now, you got to be 59 and a half to take it out without a penalty, even on the Roth, but that's a good lockbox for some people, right? Just don't touch it. As opposed to an IRA or a 401k, 403b structure, traditional, where people think, I'm saving on taxes, and sadly a lot of tax professionals advocate this. how much can I save you this year? Put some money in the IRA, the traditional, and get a deduction this year. You may be shooting yourself in the foot. I call it sort of a deal with the devil, because you know what? You don't pay tax on it in the future at what you deferred the tax rate in the year you put it away. You pay it on whatever the rate is when you take it out. And if you're a 20-year-old or a 30 or 40-year-old that will not touch this for another 2 or 3 decades, who knows what that tax rate's going to be? But I would wager pretty heavily that it'll be higher or the same, in which case it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. In the future, probably 95 to 5 in terms of odds there.
Do you think so? I've got a
being the same or down versus going down, right?
Yeah. So I have a modest traditional IRA. It's actually a simple, but whatever.
Yep.
I've been working and putting stocking money in it for a really long time. I have a investment property where I'm thinking. So I'll just kind of bare my soul. I don't know if my wife's going to appreciate this if I say this, but with being married and having lots of kids and having investments in other places, I don't mind saying this out loud, but I tend to be more cash poor these days, as opposed to, just because somebody has investments, and just because somebody looks the part, that doesn't always mean that they're rolling around in cash.
Correct.
Okay. At all.
Right.
And I'm one of the first to admit that I am not one of these people rolling around in cash at all. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. Every time I pay tuition to a private school, I feel it. Christmas this year, we decided to do a little bit more for our loved ones. I can feel it. I'm like, oh boy, that's gonna kind of hurt in Q1 of next year. I've got a question. and this is for anybody. People who have either simple IRAs or traditional IRAs, if they've got a certain amount of money in there that they've been, so I started putting money in there when I was 16, 17. No, 18, I guess. But I've amassed a modest sum. Nothing crazy. I won't say what it is, but it's modest. I am so tempted to cash that in because I have heard whispers that it's possible that the feds could really hammer that at some point in time. Because if you take a look at the aggregate of all of the stuff that's wrapped in, everything from all of the, I don't know what the number is in terms of capital value, but I think it's
15 trillion roughly.
Yes, something like that.
Deferred retirement accounts, yeah.
15T?
That's got a big target on its back. It's juicy. I mean, it's stroke of a pen, change the tax.
I mean,
rates.
they could do that with an EO. They don't even have to, I mean, can't
right.
they?
Well, no.
Or does that have to go through legislation?
I don't think they could do it by executive order, but, I mean, as they reset the tax brackets or whatever, restate them, I mean, we know they're going to sunset in 2026 back to what they were in 2017 before the new brackets took effect in 2018. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's exactly my point. You don't know what your tax rate will be in the future. And I mean, the highest, you may not, the highest federal tax rate in the country's history was 94%, 94. That was back in the 40s. And you only had to make $200,000 to be in that bracket, but, and so that's real money, but still, it's, when I say they're on sale, even when JFK was in, he got it down to about 50%, and Reagan ultimately down to about 28 on the top, the top marginal bracket I'm talking about. But I've seen CBO estimates that take us back to numbers more like closer to 94 than 32 as a top bracket. So
are we at 32 or 38 right now?
Well, it's 37, and then
top bracket.
The top bracket, 37.5, I think it is. But
so it goes back to this question. I have an investment in which a commercial space where I need to get HVAC in there, some electrical, some plumbing, and I've got bids out there that's going to cost $70,000-$80,000 to do that. Mm-hmm. So as a cash-strapped person, my 401k, when I do the math on it, my account's going to kill me. if I do
well,
this.
and so is the penalty, because if you're not 59 and a half, which you're not,
Which I'm not.
you got a 10% penalty as well. So, there's trade-offs there. But I've heard the type of strategy you're kind of talking about is thinking about it as a 401 condo instead of a 401k.
Well, I mean, what would happen if I would just liquidate that thing, put all the money into the commercial space, pay it off, and then get income for the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah. I mean, you take a good hit up front because you got the
50%.
taxes and, would it push you up in a higher bracket? But right now it won't as much as it will in 3 years.
I mean, I don't know if I want to wait till I'm in my 60s to take that money. I might want to take it now and do the math on what I think I'm going to get in the income.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody tells me not to do this.
Well, but that's okay. So,
Excuse me.
tinfoil hat firmly in place. It's in Wall Street's best interest to tie that money up and keep it in mutual funds or ETFs till, in perpetuity, more or less.
Yeah.
So that's what we're taught. We're taught to. I mean, I hate to put it this way, but it's kind of a sheep herding exercise, right? Get everybody to and really pull it out of, force employers to enroll people in 401ks and so forth, and money's out of sight, out of mind from the employee's perspective. He's not enjoying use of it, and one day he's likely going to be taxed on it higher than he would have if he'd have just taken it at this time. I mean, we're on that trajectory, whether or not that plays out or not. I mean, you may be onto something. Do the math. I will say that that you will get pushback from your CPA probably, but it doesn't mean that they're right.
I've already asked her.
Yeah.
She's like, that's the dumbest thing you could do. I'm like, well, you know how long? It's going to take me a while to get the cash to get this thing finished. 70-year-olds. How should they invest? 60, 70-year-olds. How should they invest, or should they invest?
Well, that's such an individual. Has their ship come in, or are they still waiting for that? Do they have legacy concerns? There's lots of different questions there. But
let's say they have little debt. Their ship didn't necessarily come in, but they're comfortable, and they've got a decent income that they might work another, maybe let's say someone's 60, maybe they might work another 10, 12 years. They're comfortable, nothing too crazy, but they've got a small amount of cash they can do something with. Where's the smart money for?
Typically the answer to that would be to move more toward bonds, with interest rates spiking a historical pace and rate last year. The last 18 months, bonds got hammered, bonds got killed. So those, that safe place wasn't so much. So you have to be nimble. You have to, there's another word Ramsey hates, but annuities can be useful there. I've used them. I've not used them. I'm agnostic to the tools. I don't go on radio or in my conference room and say I hate this or that financial product because it's inanimate. It doesn't. They're all just tools, right? If you're gonna build a house, you're gonna need a saw and a hammer and screwdrivers and things of that nature, and you're probably gonna need different types of saws, And so they're all just tools. Just use whatever makes the most sense. Annuities can work. I use a lot, frankly, of life insurance, properly designed, and that's another, a dirty word to a lot of people, but you can. That and Roth IRAs or 401ks are really the only two financial tools where you can, aside from doing real estate and holding it to your death and letting your heirs get step up in basis and so forth, but to get tax-free growth, really tax-free growth that you can use, it's Roth and life insurance. But you got to start that before you're 70, right?
Well, yeah.
And so, but properly designed, that life insurance tool will help you develop. These days you mentioned earlier, shopping is tougher. You got to make $1 do more than one job, right? And life insurance will do that. Even just as an example, I've used mine, tapped mine many times, buy a vehicle, pay myself back on my own bank in that way, and that money's accruing to my bottom line.
This would be whole, not term, obviously.
Well, I've done the whole life thing. That doesn't pencil for cash accumulation where you can use and reuse. It's more of an index universal type of or a universal structure in one form or another, which is a hybrid between term and whole. Oh. Definitely not term.
Definitely not, because
most likely not whole, because it's just inflexible in that way.
Okay.
The universal gives you a lot more flexibility, and you can, unlike a Roth, you can pull that money out, use it to buy a car. I've used it to set up my own shingle as a financial advisor when I left the corporate gig in that space, and pay myself back. So I'm my own bank in that way. And then when I retire, I'll be able to access that money in a tax-free way to live off of.
So am I too old to do that? Or wait, I'm 47, so can I start this?
Oh, absolutely.
Is now a good time to do this?
It's a terrific time to do it.
And it's universal life?
Yeah. I mean, you want to make sure you're working with somebody who knows how to structure that. I've found most people don't. They think life insurance is death benefit. You got to die for somebody to get a benefit, and it ain't going to be you. And that's untenable for a lot of people. It's something they don't want to do. Yeah, that's term, but even whole life is a similar thought process.
Okay.
But you got to make sure somebody knows how to design that right up to the MEC limit so that you can shove as much cash as you can in there and still call it life insurance. Those laws changed in the 80s. Used to, people would dump millions of dollars, one lump sum. The tax benefits were too good. So they adjusted those rules 3 times in the 80s, and they set this thing called where you had to have an insurance corridor. This is getting too wonky, but basically it's got to still be insurance, but you can design it where it's much more cash heavy so that you can see that accumulation and you can tap that without harming your life policy, so that ultimately it can be used for covering your estate taxes if your ship really does come in for your family. It can be used for your income. Long-term care, people don't like to spend money on long-term care policies.
Yeah.
But this will cover that. I mean, they've got hybrid policies with those kinds of riders on there. So there's a dollar doing multiple jobs for you. And that's what the 40, 50, 60-year-old needs to be thinking about, right? Diversify in a portfolio. Use some insurance products. Don't poo-poo that stuff. Learn about it. It's powerful.
Okay. Well, we're almost done, so I got one more question. What do you want to talk about? What is something in your life and in your line of work, your career of wealth management, wealth creation, wealth? What you do is it can be over people's heads, including mine. As you started talking about, even just universal health, talking about how the dollar can do multiple things, and you even admitted it starts to get kind of wonky. But I like hearing these things, and if we had more time, we would go into more and more. And you've done this on the radio, and you do this for a living, and you're very good at it, and I know you are. Is there anything else that, as we wrap up, anything on your mind that we didn't get to?
I tell you what, I'm really excited about right now, and I wasn't for a long time, but I kept getting clients asking me, "What about cryptos? What about cryptos?"
Oh. And
I just pushed back on it. I just didn't want to do it. But I 2 or 3 years ago, I looked at Bitcoin when it was like $2,700, and I thought, this is a bubble. This is stupid. People are going to lose their rear ends on this thing. That was like 7 or 8 years ago.
So what is your opinion?
Well, so I started to.
Let's not talk about the 15,000 other cryptos.
Right.
Let's not talk about Litecoin or Ethereum or XRP, because I've got opinions about all of these different cryptos. Let's just talk about Bitcoin for a few minutes. What is your general opinion? If anybody listening, we're talking about Bitcoin now. By the way, you've wandered into one of my favorite topics of all time, and I have not had the chance to talk to anybody about Bitcoin. I do want your opinion. If the government doesn't kill it, if like Elizabeth Warren or these people, these politicians that really, like Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of
You know what
JP
all that
Morgan
is, right?
and
They're just talking it down so they can get their.
Do you think that's what it is?
They can place their claims, stake their claims. Oh yeah.
You think so?
They're trying to put a bunch of FUD out and scare people and get the prices down so they can maintain market share. This is coming, right? Elizabeth Warren and all her saber rattling. That's jockeying for position, and with her Goldman, BlackRock friends, whatever, right?
Well, her net worth has jumped to about 80 million.
Right. So follow the money, right? So this is all FUD. This is noise, and it's because digital currency is coming. I mean, people are engaged in digital currencies whether they want to or not. Right now, your bank account is not sitting there in dollars. It's ones and zeros, right? So, but there's only two so-called cryptocurrencies, and that's a misnomer, really. The currency part. It's just a means of exchange, like anything. If I brought you a pig to exchange for some chickens or something, it's just something that we find value in, and we agree to some sort of terms there.
Yes.
But so there's only two that have legislative or legal clarity, and that's Bitcoin and XRP.
Yes.
And so in my view, Bitcoin is because I know we're short on time, it's kind of like gold. It's a store of value, but it's never going to be a ubiquitous medium for exchange.
Right.
Because it's too damn costly.
Yep.
It's hard on the environment.
Yep.
It's slow.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you want to store money there, and that's good, and every once in a while change it into something like XRP that you can spend on a fraction of a coin level right now, real time, 24/7, 365. We sitting here having a conversation as retail investors have no idea how big cross-border transactions and payments and that kind of thing really are, and what this use case can mean. But I'm telling you what, that XRP use case is phenomenal. I think this Web3 blockchain kind of era that we're in is like being able to invest in an Amazon or a Google in 97 or 96. So I started by this answer by saying I didn't want to deal with it for a long time because I just didn't understand it. It was too esoteric. I encourage people to start to learn about it. There's all kinds of resources on YouTube. Learn about it because it's coming whether you like it or not. You might as well get on board and figure it out. And there are going to be blockchain millionaires, billionaires made in this era.
We have a minute or two left. We will end this about Bitcoin, okay?
Okay.
And we'll shake hands and be done. Bitcoin, what I figured out is that price is information. If I tell you behind door number 1, I've got a car that's worth $5,000, and behind door number 2, there's a car that's worth $200,000, okay? And I tell you, you can have any car between any door, but I'm not going to show you what the car looks like. All you know is one's worth $5,000 and one is worth $200,000. Now, when you pick the door, you take possession of the car. You can do whatever you want with it. You can drive it. You can keep it. You can give it to your kids. You can sell it. And when you sell it, you can take all the money. You don't have to give me anything. Are you picking door number 1 or door number 2?
The 200,000.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that is what's happening with Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When you take a look at something and Bitcoin moved up to $1, all the Bitcoin miners, when Bitcoin went from a 32nd of a penny to a penny, that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then it went to a nickel.
Yeah.
I mean, XRP right now is trading at 62 cents, something like that. Bitcoin is trading at 42.5 at this very moment. 42,000.
Yeah.
And XRP is trading at 62 cents.
Right.
Right. And XRP is fast.
Yes.
Bitcoin's slow.
Yes.
When the Bitcoin paper came out, when the creator of Bitcoin is a anonymous figure, which is insane.
Right.
The white paper came out explaining what Bitcoin was. It was talking about a peer-to-peer. Pardon?
Theories on who that really is?
I mean, we have to have you and I have to do a pod just on Bitcoin.
Okay.
Because we talk about the immutability of the ledger. It's got a finite supply of 21 million coins. Mm-hmm. You take 21 million coins times 100 million satoshis, and you're in the I think that's 2.4 quadrillion Satoshis, by the way. The reason why I know that, because I've done the math, because I care that much about Bitcoin. I do believe that Bitcoin is the future, as long as the government doesn't kill it. I think that if 10, 20, 30 years from now, if somebody owned 0.2 Bitcoin, they're probably going to be a pretty wealthy person because everyone's going to want a piece.
Yeah.
So but yeah, Bitcoin. Yeah. The fact that we're ending the pod on that makes me super happy. And once we go offline again, I'll probably talk to you more about it.
Excellent. Sounds great.
Thanks so much, buddy.
All right.